Welcome, everyone. My name is Julia Toothaker, and I am the career coach and strategist behind Ride the Tide Collective, the podcast, and the company. This is a career-focused podcast that helps ambitious professionals strategize and take action to control their career in a way that aligns with their personality and their values. This season, I am embracing the collective part of my company name, and I've invited on various coaches and experts to talk about topics that impact career development and career decisions. This episode is going to be, I think, a little bit different for a couple of reasons. One, the guest is actually one of my friends who I have worked with. We know each other in real life. We have met and stood in front of each other. And we are going to be talking about managing a full-time job and a side hustle. And for those who have been listening to me for a while, you know that I primarily work with people who want a 9 to 5, who don't necessarily want a side hustle, who don't want to be entrepreneurs, because that is not something that I ever wanted for myself. I never put myself into that camp.
And look at you now.
I know, look at me now. But Rachel here, she has always been that way since I have known her. And just a little bit about her. Less than 2 years ago, Rachel was working full time, but she wasn't really passionate about it, which I understand. I think that happens for a lot of people at some point in their career. But you were also going to school. You had 2 young kids. There was a lot going on, a little bit of postpartum depression, which for moms out there, we have all had some of that at some point if we have had children. So I absolutely get that. And so you dreamed of starting a business. And I think when I met you, you had a side hustle doing one thing, and now it's starting to shift. So I'm excited to get to talk about that. But you have really taken something and honed in on it and figured out what to do, shifted that into a sustainable business that actually allowed you to leave the 9 to 5. And that's part of why I wanted you to come in and talk about this, because I think there's a difference between somebody who is working full time and does something on the side because they want to for funsies, and somebody who is actively trying to leave the 9 to 5 and build a sustainable business that's going to help them get to whatever their goals are, whether that's financial success or business success, whatever you define that as. So Rachel, thank you so much for being a guest. I'm so excited to have you on here and have one of my real friends actually on the podcast.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm excited to be here. And I know we'll have a great conversation because we always do.
We do. I think we had probably a 15-minute conversation before we even started recording, because we love talking to each other and having all these fun conversations. But let's hone in on the topic. And I want to start off with, what should people be thinking about? I think, with COVID, with the pandemic, this idea of, being your own boss, starting a business, doing a side hustle, financial freedom, all of that became a really hot topic just across the board. And what do you think is the first thing that people should be thinking about if they're already kind of nudging toward a side hustle while they're working?
Yeah, I think they need to think about what their business idea is going to be. And that can take a long time, and it can take confidence to take action. But some people, I used to work as a business consultant too at a women's business center, and people would come in and they'd have this dream, and it's like, I want to have a business, period. And it's like, great, what kind of business do you want? They're like, I don't know. And so I think if you are at the I don't know stage, that's okay. I think it starts with having some kind of motivation or inspiration to work for yourself, because Lord knows it's not easy. Mm-hmm. And you have to have some kind of push, I think, whether it's internal or external, that pushes you a little bit or pulls you to be interested in entrepreneurship. And so figuring out, just having the idea that, yes, I want this for myself, I think that's a good start. And then once you get past that of that is something I'm interested in, then you do need to try to figure out what your strengths are. That's a good place to start. What are you interested in? Where are the gaps that you see in the market? But I do think you need to kind of bring all of those together, because you might see a gap. I see opportunities all the time because I've trained my mind to think that way. But then I'm like, that's not my skill set, or that's not what I'm interested in. And so I push those aside. So it has to everything has to align. But if you want to start a business and you're paying attention, over time, you'll start to see opportunities, and you know, you can pass, pass, pass. Think of it like sports. If you're an athlete, where you know, you take your shots, and sometimes they don't work, or sometimes you pass the ball because you're like, no, that it's not a good shot for me. It's not a good shot for me. You keep going, and then eventually you're like, oh, this one looks good, and you shoot the ball, and maybe it goes in, maybe it doesn't. And again, that's an important part of the mindset, is sometimes it will work, sometimes it doesn't, but you just keep trying.
Yes, I love that, because I feel like, you know, I got into career coaching because that's what I did for a profession. So it was an easy switch for me, but there were definitely moments where I was like, do I actually want to do this?
Right.
Is there something else out there? You know, and then even within whatever area you choose, like finding your voice
Mhm.
in that, I think is so important, because I've been in masterminds with women, usually women, who are exactly what you're talking about. I want a business. I want financial freedom. I want time freedom.
Mhm.
And they spend so much time just thinking about having a business that they're not actually taking an action toward it, or they're not doing like a really good assessment of their skill set, you
Right.
know. And it's sad to watch, because I've seen some really talented people just get bogged down by their own like mistrust of themselves and their skills. Do you have any
Mhm.
thoughts around that? Like if somebody is feeling stuck around, I know I want to do something, like what could they do? Like what is something like tangible that they could do to help them get unstuck?
100%. Talk to other people. I think we all have blind spots, and this is, what is it, the expert dilemma. When you're really good at something, you'd think everybody's really good at it, and it's like, oh no, that's just, you know, like, I'm not that good of a cook. Everybody can cook like that, and it's like, no, this is the best whatever I've ever had in my life. And you're like, oh no, you're just flattering me, like they're just being nice. And I think especially women do that. And so talk to other people, and it might feel weird, but you can literally send an email out if you don't want to talk to people, or text like your closest friends, your family members, and just say, hey, I'm doing some reflection exercises. What do you think my strengths are? You can ask that, like keep it simple. Or you could say, you know, I'm thinking about starting a side hustle and trying to bring in some extra income. Like, what skills do you think I have that you would be willing to hire me for? And it
Mhm.
feels really weird. That's a weird question, but being an entrepreneur is all about getting out of your comfort zone. So that's a baby step you can take, but you'll be surprised what you get back. And I think, like, Julia, I'm sure people have come up to you before you were doing this full. I mean, I know they were, when you were working full time, they would ask you, like, do you do this on the side? That's a huge clue. If you're really good at something and you do it for work a lot and people know about it, like, I think when I was younger, this didn't happen because you're just young and not that many people know you and you're still figuring out what you're good at. But as you get older and you have a certain role, people know who you are and know what you
Mhm.
do, and they keep their eye out. And sometimes they, you know, you might be at a cocktail party or at a dinner or something, and somebody's like, hey, let me pick your brain about X. Anytime somebody wants to pick your brain about something, that's something they think you're an expert at, they think you're really good at. So write that down and be like, oh, I
Yeah.
guess I am good at that. And pay attention to even the conversation you have. You might be like, oh, I'm what? And then you just like spurt out all this stuff, and you're like, whoa, I could have just like written a blog post, and I just had this 5-minute conversation with somebody, and actually that was really
Right.
good. So there's a
Right.
lot of stuff that you can do, but just again, paying attention to those signals, and don't be afraid to charge people. If somebody's like, hey, can I pick your brain? You can be like, yeah, I'm like, this is again a tip from entrepreneurship. Just act as if, right? And so you can be like, yeah, I charge $50 an hour. Is that okay? Because you're a busy professional probably. And
Yeah.
so, and we want to boost that confidence. And so if you keep giving your stuff away for free, and people will pick your brain for free and never pay you for it, and it's hard to tell whether or not that is something people would buy out in the market unless you actually ask them to put their put some skin in the game. So yeah,
Yes.
it can be inexpensive, like whatever you feel comfortable charging. And I remember doing that. I had somebody like from my elementary school days, we were Facebook friends, and they were like, hey, I know you're really good with business. And this was when I was still in my side hustling days, like writing blog posts that nobody read. But I guess a handful of people did. And he was like, I know you're really into business. I'm thinking about starting this business. Can we meet? And I hadn't talked to him for years. I kind of feel bad. I was like, yeah, it's $200 an hour. He's like, okay.
Yeah.
And I feel like I should frame that check, because I came home to my husband like $200 is nothing, but at the same time, it's a lot for an hour. And I was just like,
Yeah.
I made $200. I didn't show him that, right? I wasn't
Right.
like, oh my God, you're going to pay me. I was like, yes, it's $200. Okay. Would you like to meet? Period. Right. So that's the sales, Rachel. And then the inside that my husband gets to see is like, oh my God, I made a sale. Yay. I'm an expert now. Somebody paid me for this.
Yes. Okay. I love that. Like really listening to what people are coming to you for and asking you for. And you're right. I mean, before I did this, people asked me all the time outside of work hours to
Mm-hmm.
coach, and I turned everybody down. Because I wasn't a side hustler. It was not
Right.
something that I wanted to do. And I was doing it all day and I was tired and I didn't want to go home and have to do it, you know?
Yeah.
And here's the interesting thing too. I think when you think about where you want your business to go, it can ebb and flow.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I started, my business was focused on the podcast. And I
Okay.
just wanted to do the podcast and I wanted to share all my knowledge and put it out there for free. And I didn't really care. And it was about maybe 9 months in or so. And I was turning people away. Like people were asking me for coaching and I was turning them away because I was like, I don't want to coach. I don't want to coach. I don't want to coach. And finally, about 9 months in, I was like, oh, maybe. Okay. And I reluctantly gave in. But that was because I knew where I was mentally, I knew where I was emotionally, and I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to give of myself in that way. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think understanding kind of where your energy lies is
100%.
so helpful because if you have like a really demanding 9 to 5 job, thinking about what adding a side hustle to that could be like and what you want to do because you started out doing you said blogging but then you were selling resources, so you weren't necessarily selling like your time the way that like me as an individual coach would do. Can you talk a little bit about like the difference there in terms of like passive income versus you being actively part of the product?
100%. And I'll go way back because I think it's helpful for people if they haven't started a side hustle yet. So I worked at a women's business center. I studied entrepreneurship. I was always, when I decided on my degree, I wanted to go into fashion merchandising. And then I picked entrepreneurship because the school I went to didn't have that. But I was like, I want to own my own retail store. I don't know. That was my 18-year-old Rachel dream. And then when I worked as a non-paid intern at the Women's Business Center, I realized I liked business consulting. I liked helping people and creating trainings. And like, I basically got paid to learn and then teach other people, which is just more learning. And I love to learn. So I was like, this is cool. You can get paid for this? Whoa. So I wanted to do a course and I partnered with the Women's Business Center and launched something. It was like a 90-day business challenge. And it was like $1,000 per person. And this was when we first met, Julia. And
Yes.
so I did this and I launched it and it was like a handful of people, but I was like, hey, it was maybe 4 or 5 people, but that's $4,000 or $5,000 because it was a
Right.
higher ticket item. So I was so proud of myself that I was able to sell that. And I was very surprised, I'll be honest, but it took it out of me. I pre-sold it. I partnered with them and then I had an outline and I created 2 weeks of content. And then I was 2 weeks ahead of them. And then we would have a workshop. It was either the first time I launched it, I think it was every Saturday, like an 8-hour class. So in 2 weeks, I created an 8-hour
For
day.
$1,000?
Yeah. And then we met for like 6 sessions or something. It was a good deal, right?
Yeah, that's a really good deal.
But I was like in my 20s at the time. So I was like, that's a lot of money. But yeah, my hourly rate was like really low, but I just wanted to create this thing. I was like, I just got to get it created. So I did that. And then I was so excited and had so much fun, but also it would take it out of me because it was live. And so it took all this time and energy. It was when I first started working with you at the Drucker School. And so, but once I had the content done, it was like, okay, that was the hard part. Then I did it one more time and that was like, it was good, but it was again, like 4 or 5 people. And then I was just like, okay, I'm done. Like, I don't want to do that anymore. That was a lot of work. And I think too, I didn't have the confidence to like really try to market it to like thousands of people. And
Mhm.
the technology was there, but it's not where it is now. That was over 10
Yeah.
years ago now, I'm sure. And so creating a digital course was just harder and I didn't have the knowledge at the time. So then I was just like, okay, that was fun, but like, I think and to talk to your point about energy, it took a lot of my energy and the payoff wasn't that high. So I was just like, okay, I have this content, I've done this thing, I have some confidence, I learned a lot, I think I'm going to take a break. And then I did dog sitting. So that was random, but that was actually a lot of fun. Because I just, now they have Rover, it was dog vacay at the time, but it's basically like Airbnb. So you just put your house up there and you can get clients really easily. So the marketing is super simple, and I love dogs. And so they would just like come hang out at my house. I remember one July, because of 4th of July, everybody was on vacation. We had like 7 dogs here, but I made like $1,000 that month to just hang out with cute little puppies and like let them hang out in my backyard or whatever. So that was, from an energy perspective, it took a lot less of my energy. I didn't have to market anything. I just had to do a couple like customer service emails, and then they would do like meet and greets. So, on a weekend, they'd come over for 10 minutes and be like, yeah, you're not crazy. Your house looks clean. We want our dog to stay here.
Yeah.
And so that was fine. And then I had a dog get out and it lived, but there was some drama with that. And so that took a lot of my energy. And then the risk was high and the reward wasn't worth it. So then I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. And so that was kind of my journey. I just dabbled, and then I had kids, I got busy, I got promoted. And so work was busy, and I just kind of was like, I still like side hustles, but I wasn't actively pursuing them. I had my son and I was on maternity leave, and I'd had a blog before, but I would like start it and then write some things and then get busy. And so there was a course that I saw that was teaching you how to blog. And I was like, okay, last time I just did it my own and it didn't work well. So let me buy this course. And then they had a course about how to sell printable products on Etsy, which I'd never heard of. And I was just like, that seems easy and like interesting. So I'll just buy both of these. So I started my Etsy store first, because I'm just going to get it set up, like do it for a couple weeks or a month, and then like move on to the blog, because the blog will take more time. So I did the Etsy store in the month, and then next month I did the blog, and then I tried to do the blog for a few more months, and then I just got bored of it or whatever and busy. And then I was trying to like build a social media following, but didn't have any products, and, doing all the things and being busy, but also working full time. So it's like, it was just kind of fun hobby practicing. And then like another year later, I had my daughter, and then I was on maternity leave, and I was just like, what am I doing with my life? And I wasn't happy. I had postpartum depression, but I had studied positive psychology in grad school. And so I was like, okay, I'm depressed. This is not fun. I don't like my life that much, but I know that there are tools that I can use to make it better. And we're in the middle of COVID. I'm isolated. Like, if I'm a doctor, like, what's going on with this patient? And I'm like, oh yeah, there's some things that aren't great. Once I looked at those and was aware, I could improve them. And so I was like, okay, I probably need some more human interaction. I scheduled a family FaceTime, which we still do to this day. That's once a week, on the weekend. That helped me get, more connection with my family and things like that. So I started putting those things, but I also was looking at like all the side hustling random stuff that I was doing that wasn't giving me the results I wanted. And it was stressing me out. And so I was like, why would I do all this? So I evaluated everything. The blog wasn't making money, but the Etsy store actually was. It was making like $50 a month, and I was literally ignoring it. And so I was like, well, what if I actually paid attention to it? What could I do with that? And the other thing, again, because I studied positive psychology, I think I had more of a fixed mindset in the past, where it's like, you're either smart or you're not. And like, this is what I'm good at. I'm not good at those things. And that's just the way it is. And then I shifted to be like, no, let me have more of a growth mindset of like, maybe my Etsy store is only making $50 right now, but there's other people that are making more, and they're not that any smarter than I am. They just have studied more. They've learned something that I don't know, but I can learn that too. And so I had a better mindset around it. And then I just put my head down and started studying, and paying attention and practicing. So like posting new items, looking, again, doing the research. I think that was a big shift for me, rather than making things that I liked to make, trying to find things that I like to make that also people were interested in buying. Hey, that's an important thing for business. It took me forever to learn that lesson, even though all my business teachers tried to teach it. And
sometimes you have to go through it though.
Oh yeah, you do.
I went through so many trainings, probably similar to what you did. And I'm like, I hear you, but it's not getting into practice.
Yeah. And then you do it and you're like, whoa, like 10 years later, oh, that's what I was supposed to do. Why didn't anyone tell me? And it's like, oh, a lot of people told me, but I don't know why I was being stubborn or not listening.
Yeah.
But yeah, so once like the culmination of having a growth mindset, studying, focusing on one thing rather than spreading myself thin. And I think just having the determination too, I think it's like knowing my goal. So before, my goal was just like, this is fun, let me learn, like it'd be cool, but I think I didn't have the confidence. And so I didn't set, it's like chicken or egg. Did I not have the confidence? So that's why I didn't set the goal, or did I not set the goal on that? So I didn't have the confidence, not sure. Probably I didn't have the confidence, but I got older, I got wiser, things changed for me. I had 2 kids and I was like, I created babies in 9 months. I think I could create a business that makes some money in 9 months or less. And so being a mom gives you more confidence, I think. So then I was like, I don't mind going back to work, but I don't want to go back to, like, I'm not working till I'm 65. I'm over this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what can I do to really start a business that does something? And I put my head down and I focused, and things turned around, and it surprised me. I think sometimes it's just luck and keep going. And that's why I think you have to have a growth mindset. And in some ways, like from when I said, I'm going to do this, it probably took like a month or 2 of me learning. But if you look back at all the side hustles, it's like, I don't know, over 10 years from when I graduated college and like really started thinking about side hustles to when it actually happened. And so it's that iceberg, right? Like, am I an overnight success, or did it take me 10 years? Not really sure.
And that's okay. That's what I want to point out, because hearing your story, even though I know your story, I lived part of it with you, but hearing it in that timeline, it wasn't an overnight success. It was years of you like honing in and figuring out who you were, what you wanted, what you cared about, what motivated you to actually put time and effort into the business. And I see so many people who are like, okay, I'm going to start a business. And then it's like, if it doesn't work in that first launch, they're out. They're like, I have failed. It's done, and I'm sitting over here like, you can't give up that quickly, because so I have a friend who is also a career coach. And so we talk like this all the time. We're talking strategy and all of that. And we're in the same space. And so it's really fun to have those conversations like, what's working for you? This is working for me. But we talk all the time about, if somebody is having like massive success and it looks like it's an overnight success, you have to look at what they've been doing ahead of that. And so during the pandemic, I think it was really like, you saw a lot of people go, oh, I had this really big launch. It was like a $10,000, $15,000, $50,000 launch. And I'm like, what? How are you doing that? Well, they had an established social media presence.
Right.
And they had an email list with like 25,000 people on it. So I'm like, yes, you're going to have a successful launch because you have an established audience, probably from something else. It might not even be the thing that you just started. It could be from something else. And now you're actually honing in on the business side. And I hope that people hear this, because this was something that I had to learn going through, and, all the imposter syndrome of, am I actually good at this? Seeing people who are successful. And I'm like, you don't even have a background in this. Like, how are you so successful? And separating somebody who's a good marketer from somebody who is actually an expert in the area, and then making sure you understand the background of somebody and why they have been such a success.
100%. And I think there's one, I don't know if the people on here are interested in creating like a digital marketing or being an influencer in any kind of way, but especially in the online space. But I think it relates to all businesses. It's a numbers game. And so that is so hard for people to understand, especially if they went through like a traditional education, like K-12, they weren't homeschooled or something, because in school you get a 90% and that's an A, and an 80% is a B. And so like basically you're close to 100% and that's success. Well, in business, literally a 2% conversion rate is good. It's like golden. That's the goal. So your goal is to fail 98% of the time so that so you can be successful 2% of the time. So like, I love digital business because I don't like to fail. So I can just do it digitally, right? Like I can set up a system And like, if I look at my Etsy stats, it's between 2 to 5% is my conversion rate, but I don't have to be calling people and saying like, do you want to buy this? Do you want to buy this? And quite frankly, my products are priced too low for that to make sense for me from a time perspective. And so you were talking about energy before. Know that it's a numbers game, and like keep that in mind for the type of business that you're going to have. If you're going to have a person to person, are you going to have to do sales calls? If you have to do sales calls, it's probably going to have to be a higher ticket item. If it's a higher ticket item, you're going to have more confidence, because you're going to have more time potentially, or be really good at sales or whatever you're doing, because you just have to have a high close rate so that it doesn't take too much of your time. And so understanding the numbers and like taking your emotion and your ego out of it is really hard to do. But I'd like, again, remember 2% is good.
Yes.
Like 2% is an A+, and it was really hard. If you're a high achiever, it's hard to get that through your head. Right?
Yes. I can't.
But that's the list of the person. You look at somebody and they have a list of 25,000 people. So they're 2%. It's like they can sell, quick math, I think that's 50 people is 2% closing. Maybe it's 500. I think it's 50. But then if they sold that for a couple $100, it's like, there you go. There's $10,000.
Right.
But if you have a list of 100 and half of it is your family and you're offering a product that they don't want or need,
right,
you're not a failure. You just haven't done the marketing. You haven't done the stuff that you need to be successful. So just keep working.
Right. Oh my gosh. When you talk about being a high achiever and going into business, this is why I didn't want to do this. Like, I mean, people have listened to the podcast. They know why I do my business. Like, they understand my life events and all of that. But I think this is what really held me back early on, because I was like, I can't do this. There is no way. I don't have a presence, because I started from nothing,
right?
Like absolutely nothing. And it was hard to get into that growth mindset and understand, growing a presence online, finding the right thing, finding your voice. Even as somebody at the time, I think when I started, I had, I think 8 years of experience when I started my business. I'm now like over 11 or 12 now. And so it's like, I knew what I was talking about. I was good. I am good at what I do. And at that time I was good at what I did, but I was so held back by the business side of it and the intimidation of seeing all of these other people be really successful in my niche, that I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to do that. And I'll tell you, I've been in business now for like 4 years. Last year, so year 3 was actually the turning point for me. That was the true, I think, moment where I went, we are doing this like for real. And we're shifting, and I shifted my mindset, I shifted my language, I shifted my marketing, I shifted everything. But it took me those 3 years to find my voice, to find who I wanted to be in the space that I'm in, which is career coaching. And just the confidence, even though I am a confident person, I'm confident in myself as a coach, the business side is like a whole other animal to have to learn. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. So I appreciate you talking about this, because you don't realize how much work it really takes until you are in it and you're trying to build it, and you really have to push through failure. And as a high achiever, it is so hard to do that when you come from an environment where you didn't fail.
100%. It's a mental game, huge mental game. There's stats that say like people that were not A students, like C, D, F even students, they're usually more likely to be entrepreneurs or successful entrepreneurs, because they're more willing to take risks, and they don't care about the safety because they never had it, right? They were never the A+ student that got the pat on the head. And so they're just like, whatever, I'm going to break the rules. Like, I'm not showing up to class. I'm not doing things like, you didn't give me permission to be a career coach. I don't care. I'm going to do it anyways because I'm good at it. So it's just like an attitude shift. But I think that was a realization for me, is how much of a mental game entrepreneurship and even just being a side hustler is.
Yes, yes. Okay, you have given us already so much information, but as everybody knows, as I'm doing this season, I want to have some really clear actions associated with this. Some of them we've already talked about, but I want to reiterate just to make sure that everybody can kind of work through this on their own, because I think deciding to do a side hustle is a really big deal and a big impact in a lot of different ways. So let's start with some actions. What do you think is the first thing that people need to do when they're thinking about this?
So step one, look at your time, do a time audit, figure out where you're spending your time. Where can you give up? Like, are you spending 3 hours on social media and you're okay to not do that? Maybe you really want to do it. That's okay. But you need to be real with yourself. And I was talking earlier about, are you going to be making sales calls, or are you going to be doing some kind of digital marketing? Or even do you just need to learn some stuff before you start your business? But all of that takes time. And so I would start as the foundation, like, where is the time? Where can you find time in your schedule to do this thing? So start, just literally get a piece of paper and track your hours for the day. And then you can reflect on it at the end of it and be like, okay, well, did I need to take an hour lunch, or could I have taken a 30-minute lunch? Did I need to wake up at 7? Could I have woken up at 6? Like, you can find the time. And then I think be real with yourself. You might be like, I can wake up at 6, but I don't want to. And then maybe a side hustle, at least right now, maybe it's not right for you. And that's okay. But it's better to know this rather than, I think some people, like you're talking about the women, they have this dream and it's like, it's fun to talk about something. But then when you look at the reality of your life, like, your life's not bad.
Right.
And actually it could complicate things or make it worse if you started this. And so maybe you don't want to do it, or maybe you don't want to do it right now, and that's okay. But I think understanding your time is a really good start.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I think having those realistic conversations about the stage of life that you're in, and one of the things that I heard you say at least twice was a lot of this would come up when you were on maternity leave, which means you had a little bit more breathing room and space to actually think about what you wanted to do. And so it takes time to be able to do that. I know I don't even call myself an entrepreneur because I'm extremely risk averse. Like, I feel like you and I are on opposite ends of the spectrum in that way. And I'm a business owner. I will absolutely say that. And I'm a coach, but I wouldn't say that I'm an entrepreneur. But when I look at my time, I am not willing to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I am not willing to stay up until midnight. And I have friends that do that because that's just how they're wired and that's how they work. And I'm like, absolutely not. This is my good working time. Like, I tracked my energy through the day when I started my business to see when do I have the most energy to do the writing, the design, the recording, the filming, the clients, all of that. And then I built a schedule that works for that. So
that's perfect. That's
yes, I love that.
The right thing to do.
Okay. And then also, kind of along with time audit, we were talking about evaluation of resources as well. And I think this is also really important because you have to understand your financial situation, but then also the connections that you have. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So again, we have our dreams and then we have reality. And so I think you need to audit your reality, and time is a resource, but money is a resource. Your network is a resource. Your energy is a resource. Like, what are all the resources that you have that you can tap into? It, like Celine Dion's husband, I think, took a second on his house because he needed the money to sponsor Celine Dion as an artist, and it paid off. So like, do you have money hiding in little places that you want to use? Maybe. But like, I'm risk adverse. You are too. Maybe you're like, I'm not touching that. I'm bootstrapping it. I'm going to work this job and it's going to take me longer to start my business, but I'm going to save a little bit of money and like do it slowly and learn along the way. I think earlier we were asking too, like, when should somebody decide to quit their job? And so for me, I am risk adverse. And so I didn't quit my job until my side hustle was replacing my full-time income and then some for over 9 months. So it wasn't, and I had a talk with my husband when it did it like the first month. I was like, well, like, I can quit my job. And he was like, can you though? Like, this could be seasonal. I was like, I know, I'm excited. And so we had a heart to heart, and it was like, yeah, you're probably right. Let me hold off. And so he wanted a year and I settled for 9 months. So that was our compromise. But I think that's important too, because like you talked about a failed launch, well, you could have a really successful launch and then it could be crickets. And do you have an emergency fund? Like, are you going to go bankrupt? Hopefully not, but you need to think about like how risk adverse are you? Do you have a family to feed, which I did? Do you have a partner that can support you or not? There's a lot of factors. So you need to know your finances and what's going on with that before you take a huge risk, like just saying, okay, I'm just going to do it. Cause and I've heard of people do this, and I feel like in the news, it's always like they were poor and they moved in with their parents, and like 2 months later they were a millionaire. But like the odds of that are so low. And I think, and you don't know again what the 10 years before that was, right? And so they might have had an email list or a social media following or an amazing network. And so just be careful. Like it sounds really sexy, or it might sound fun, but it can be stressful if you don't know where your next meal is coming from or your next dollar is coming from. So I would say just be careful.
Yeah. And something you said earlier, you are a learner, like you are somebody that likes to learn, likes to do things. I am very similar. And so when I started my business, and I think you were the same way, I didn't outsource anything. So anything that I needed to learn, I learned. And I'm very open in saying I have a background in art and graphic design and marketing.
Right.
So I had a skill set that a lot of people outsource. I know how to build a website. So I have a technical skill set that I did not have to outsource that saved me a lot of money.
Right.
A lot of money. And so I think understanding like realistically, what is your skill set that you're bringing to the table? What do you have to learn? Do you have the capacity and ability to learn how to do that? Website stuff is not for the faint of heart. And do you
100%.
want to engage in that and learn and DIY it, or do you need to pay somebody?
Yeah. And there's pros and cons to each. I have friends. I'm more of a DIYer because I am a control freak and I like to learn and I like to have control. Right.
Same.
And so, and I've talked to there's pros and cons. I've talked to entrepreneur friends that are like, I'm not good at that. So they're smart about like, that's not my strength. I have the money. I'm going to pay somebody. But then they get into a bind that it's like, they were on vacation, or that person isn't doing this anymore, and I need something fixed. And they have no idea. They don't even know the password to log in. And so, and that scares me. That's risky to me. I'm like, I want to at least know enough to be dangerous. And so a lot of times I'm like, let me figure this out. And the world that I'm in, I feel like I'd rather figure it out because then I can teach other people too.
Yeah.
Along the path. But some people are, if you have the money, like you might be a CEO, CFO, and you're like, you have zero time, but you have tons of money. And it's like, you can have an idea and just hire a coder, and you just say like, this is what I want. And then you look at it a couple weeks later and like, that's not what I want. Go back to the drawing board. This is what needs to be changed. If that's your strength and you have the money, by all means, go for it.
Yep. And I'm to a point now where I'm starting to invest in other things to either grow my own skill set or to save me time.
Right.
But those 3 years, none of that was happening. If I had to pay for it, I was like, nope. We're not doing it.
Speaking of time, and this is one that I forget, but I think is really important. You probably need, when you're doing that time audit, like maybe you can outsource cleaning your house.
Yes.
Potentially doing your laundry, food. Like there's some simple things that don't cost a lot. So like website design, that's a skill that is expensive. And so can you learn that? And then it can help you be dangerous in the future and also can help you save money now. That might be a good skill depending on what your business is. But cleaning your house, like if you have a kid, can they do it for $10 or $20 and that's their allowance and that's how they're supporting the family? Like you need, or even just asking your partner if they can pitch in because you want to do this. And so I think those kind of conversations can be really helpful too.
Yeah.
And that's like at a bare minimum to get some of your time back, you need to start delegating some of those tasks that, especially women, that you might be taking on. And the other thing too is like maybe your house isn't as clean as it should be. My mom raised me to be very neat and tidy and clean, and we cleaned once a week, and now I have a housekeeper and she comes every other week, and my house gets messy, and I'm okay with that. But it's because I wanted to focus on the time with my kids was more important, and time on my business was more important. And so it's like I can have a spotless house and be stressed out and busy, or I can have a business and time with my family and maybe my house isn't as clean as I want to be. I bought a
Right.
Roomba, you know?
Right. Right. We bought one too.
Yeah.
That thing's amazing. Okay, I want to highlight something else that you said because I think this is not talked about enough in the entrepreneurial business world, is having that conversation with your partner if you have a partner.
Mhm.
Because I will tell you, the best thing that I ever did was bring my husband into the fold just enough that he understands what I'm doing. And so
Mhm.
because I'm solopreneur, I'm on my own, like, yes, I have people that I talk to, but he's the constant that's here,
Right.
at the end of the day when I'm wrapping things up. And so he knows about my products, he knows what's going on, he knows about, how many clients I have at any given time and all of that. And being able to have an open conversation and say, hey, this is a big week. I've got this many things going on, or I've got this presentation, or I've got that, like, I'm not going to be around, and have him understand because we've had a conversation around my time versus his time and all of that. I cannot stress that enough because if you have a partner that is not going to support you, that is going to impact your motivation and what you're able to get done in your business.
100%. And I think confidence is a really important thing. And sometimes your confidence will wane. And if you have that conversation up front with them of like, if I'm feeling scared ever, I need you to be in my corner. Cause
Mhm.
and maybe you have the conversation like, I'm gonna try this. And if I'm scared or if I'm failing, I want you to pull me out. I want you to be like, you know what, it's okay, I'll support you, just quit, like burn everything and go back to the job. Maybe that's what you want to do. It's like, let me try this. And like if I don't like it, I want you to tell me it's okay to quit. Maybe that's the conversation you want them to have it up front. Or maybe you're like, no, it's going to be hard, but like right now I'm in it. And when it gets hard, I don't want you to say it's okay to give up. I want you to push me and say, are you sure this is what you want? Or like, listen, but also be like, everything will be okay. You got this. I believe in you. You can do this. Because sometimes you need that in your corner, but it's helpful to like, when you're in a good frame of mind, to know what you want and like share that with your partner so that they can be that for you. Because you're gonna have hard moments, and if you complain a lot and you're like, this is really hard, and your partner's like, yeah, it is hard, you should give up, and then you're like, well, I don't want to, but now I feel like I should, and now you don't believe in me, and do I believe in myself, and maybe we shouldn't be together, and it can just spiral. So you don't want that to happen either.
Yes. I will tell you one of my favorite things, and you actually know my husband in real life, but he is a much more held back person in terms of, encouragement and word, I strong silent type is a
Mhm.
good way to describe him. And so when I get very nervous about things, or if something goes well, it
Mhm.
happens on both spectrums. He just looks at me and is like, why did you ever doubt that this wasn't going to go well?
Right.
Like, you know who you are, right? Like he will say something, or he'll even like roll his eyes at me
Mhm.
like, are we really having this conversation right now? And I'm like, I don't know. And he's like, oh my gosh, like what's up with you? And it's in a very loving and supportive, like,
Right.
you know who you are. Like, you don't know how to fail. You don't know how to like not figure it out. And it's like, oh yeah, I can do that.
But you need the
Yeah,
reminder. We all need the
yes.
reminder, right? We need that person in our corner. So yeah, you have to let them know what their role is.
Yes, yes. Ah, I love that. Okay, one of the other actions we talked about was choosing a side hustle, and we've talked a little bit about that, but can you give kind of another overview and some specifics around what people should do when they're trying to figure that out?
Absolutely. So I think assess your skills, your strengths, like what do you think you're good at? With that, though, you also need to look at what are the opportunities out in the market. If there are a bazillion career coaches and everybody is fully employed and they're not looking, maybe you don't want to be a career coach, right?
Mhm.
And so I feel like that's a terrible example, but I'm looking at you. But you need to do the research of, is there a demand for this thing? And so
Right.
I'll give you a hot tip from my business. Literally go to trends.pinterest.com or trends.google.com, or Uber Suggest is a great one too, but it's basically doing keyword research. And so
Mm.
people you know, back in the day, you look up the yellow pages, there's no data. Now people, when they want something, they want to purchase something, they literally Google it. Well, Google collects all that data, and so does Pinterest and all these companies. So you can literally go into the back end of this and type in words like career coach and see how many searches are happening per month, whether you want to start a cleaning business or things like that. And you can even drill it down. Like if you wanted to be a housekeeper and say housekeeper near your city, how many searches are happening for that? And you can look at like is there high search volume, and there you can, it even shows you if there's low competition. So like, yes, a lot of people are searching for this, and there's not that many websites with this specific keyword that are popping up. So like, that's a clue that maybe that's a good opportunity. So I think that's the really important part. And then even going out, like we talked about, going out in the world and talking to people. And, you know, if you're at the strengths, you're figuring out what your strengths are, you ask your friends what those are. But then if you know, like, okay, this is the idea I have, you can go to your friends and family that you know that might be interested in this thing and ask them, and they can be your first customers because they already know, like, and trust you. But then you can start cold calling people. Like, who is your target market? If you're going to offer something and you think it's amazing, again, house cleaning is just simple, but like you could knock on doors or put a little business card on every door, and that doesn't cost you much, and it takes you 30 minutes, and maybe somebody will call you. Right. And so that's like an inexpensive, fast, simple way to like get some data back to like, okay. And again, remember, it's a numbers game. So if you put 100 flyers back, you're really happy if you get 2 calls. And again, that seems crazy, but that's the world we live in. And so you just keep doing that. And if you hear crickets, you can keep trying, or maybe you shift some things or try again. But it's important to constantly be looking for that data.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that. And we'll link those links that you mentioned. I'll put that into the blog post so that people can access that really easily to do their own research. Okay. I want to talk about the career coach thing though, because what I think is different with my situation is I had a career in this and then did a business. And so if you're in a similar scenario where it's like you've had a full-time career doing the thing that you want a business on, you have to figure out what that niche is going to be. And so as a career coach, I was like, okay, I had 8 years at the time, 8 or 9 years of data I worked with people from all industries, all personality types, different levels, you know, from freshmen in college to people who were doing encore careers and they were 70 years old. Like, I had a wealth of data, and I went through and said, who were my favorites? Where did I see the biggest impact and change in people where I felt good about it? And I felt like there was a really natural connection, and I was working in my strengths. And I was like, high achievers. It was really working with people who are high achieving. And then once I like lost my parents and had my kid and all of that, it was high achievers who are lost and who are questioning and who want control back. So if you've been following me, hello, control your career. Because for me, having control, that's what I was wanting. And I didn't have it for so long in my own career. And I wanted to help people take that power back. But it took me about 2 years of posting on social media, talking to people, reflecting on my own time to go, this is it. This is the thing. And I've now doubled down on that, you know, and I'm seeing the results of that just in the last probably 9 months or so. Oh man, my business has changed dramatically because I figured out the niche, I figured out the thing, and I'm doubling down on that. And I'm saying no to things that I don't want to do. And I think that's really important too, when you're trying to figure out what you want to do, figure out also what you don't want to do.
100%. And I just want to highlight that you said that you're like niching down, because I think most people, you're going to start broad, right? Like the cleaning. And so you do a bunch of flyers and you do all these different neighborhoods. And then you're like, well, I got 5 calls from the high end neighborhood. Maybe I should market more there. And then you're like, okay, I'm not just cleaning company, I'm cleaning for high end homes because I have X amount of years of experience in XYZ, or maybe it's for like medically, what is the word? I don't want to say unstable, but like there's people with medical conditions. And so they need it to be like really clean. They just don't want it to look nice. Sterile. Yeah. medically fragile. Like my
Oh,
sister's a
got it.
speech therapist, so there's like children and adults that are medically
Right.
fragile, and so they might need so you can niche down, and then there's much
Mhm.
more demand because people are looking, they don't want just anybody, and they
Mhm.
appreciate your strengths and your story. And so
Mhm.
you start to hone in on all those things, and I think that is really that sets you apart, and you start to differentiate yourself, and then you can sell more.
Yes, yes. Oh my gosh, I love this conversation, Rachel. This is so great.
Try to add value, right?
All right. So the last action that we had talked about was a growth mindset. And that is something that I think, I hope the audience has heard throughout this conversation, because you and I both have had different points where we're like, are we even doing the right thing? Are we any good at
Right.
this thing that we're doing? So what do you think are some like really tangible things that people can do to help with that growth mindset if they're questioning themselves?
So a really tangible thing that you can do is just try to change your questions. So I think
Mm,
things that people do, your questions and the inner talk that you have. And so a lot of times people will just like, why am I a failure? Right? That's very negative. Instead of saying something like that, you can ask the question like, what can I learn from this? You're going to fail. We're all going to fail. We're constantly failing. But the hope with a growth mindset is that you fail forward and you learn something from it. And so anytime something bad happens, if you can feel your emotions, they're valid, feel them.
mhm,
And then when you get to a little bit better of a place, ask better questions. So ask like, what
mhm,
can I learn from this? And like, I mean, you've dealt with your parents dying. I know that was emotional. I can't imagine that. Like that is one of my biggest fears. And I know it's going to happen. It's going to happen to all of us, right? It's scary to deal with, but I'm
mhm.
sure you learned a ton from it. And now you're on the other
Yeah.
side and you can share with you can share your
Mhm,
story. And I feel like you're in some ways a better person for it because of the fact that you've gone through it, and you can help other people go through hard
mhm,
things, whether it's the loss of parents or other hard things.
mhm.
It's not the end of you, and you're an inspiring story because you've dealt with something hard.
Thank you.
And so, but that's what a growth mindset is. And so if you can,
Yeah.
it's hard when you're in the moment, but if you can kind of think back, and when you're in a good moment and things aren't hard, look back at your life. You've dealt with hard stuff. And
Mhm,
that can help give you confidence too, of like, well, what did I learn from those things? And am I better for it? And so when you approach something that's hard in the future or tomorrow, again, just going back to the question of what can I learn from this? And it will help you pull strength and get lessons from it,
mhm.
right? I've heard somewhere that
Yes.
like mistakes are made or repeated. Oh, what's the quote? It's almost like mistakes are repeated until the lesson is learned. I'm botching the quote. There's some
Mm.
way sexier way to say that, but I don't remember it. But basically, you're going to make the same mistake over and over and over again until you learn from it. And then once you learn from it,
Mhm.
then you can move on. You don't have to make the same mistake again. So,
Right.
do you want to feel that pain, whatever that hard thing was, once and then move on? Or do you want to feel it over and over and over again? I feel like
Mhm.
that would suck really hard. So,
Right.
might as well learn from it, move on. And then if something similar happens, you can be like, oh, I've dealt with this before. And then it's so much easier to move forward.
Yes, yes. Oh my gosh. So early when I started my business, like I think within the first year or so, I was following a business coach who I loved and wished at the time I could have worked with them, but the money wasn't there because I had just started. But I was following everything, every free webinar, every live that they did. I mean, I was on their stuff. And one of the things that she said was, when you're launching a product or you have something out there, if it doesn't go the way that you want, then you have to figure out what the barrier is
Mm-hmm.
and then make the change and make the adjustment and then do it again. And then make a change and adjustment and then do it again. Make a change and adjustment and do it again. And that has stuck with me up to this point because it absolutely changed my mindset about how I approached my products, my web pages, my sales pages, all of that. And so even now, I have things that have been on my website for a long time. And if it's not converting, if I'm seeing people visiting and it's not converting, I'm like, what is going on?
Mm-hmm.
What messaging is not landing? What am I missing? What do I need to do? And I'll make little tweaks and little adjustments and all of that to see if that makes a difference. And I think that's some of what this is too. It's just persistence and
Mhm.
continuing to make tweaks. I have stuff that I've been selling for a couple of years, and about once or twice a year, I go through and I'm like, is this what it needs to say?
Right.
And you continue to change and evolve as you change and evolve as a business owner.
100%. And I think I just want to broaden it because growth mindset is so good for life. But it's like any goal that you have, like if you're trying to lose weight and it's not working, don't just do the same thing, tweak something, right?
Yes.
Your relationship, like I think when you have kids, like life is constant change. We don't want it to be, and sometimes we don't notice it because it's so slow. But then we get to a point where like, I don't like this. When I had 2 kids, relationships are hard. You have lack of sleep, you're busier, things shift. And so if you don't like it, then you have to have the conversation. So my husband and I sat down and it's like, this isn't my favorite anymore. Like, what can we do to change this? Right. And
Yes.
I think most couples go through that. And so a lot of people just throw in the towel, right? Like during COVID, there were a lot of divorces and things like that. People are just like, this is really hard. It's different. It's hard. I'm done. But, and maybe that's what you want to do. But again, having a growth mindset, what can you learn from this? Can you tweak it? If you can, make some changes, and maybe you realize, look, it's not going to work even with tweaks. It's totaled.
Right. Right.
Right. Or maybe you're like, oh, it just, needs a little shine and it's good to go.
On the career side, I talk about seasons of life, and it's something that I try to put in a lot of my videos and social media and all of that. It's like, what do you need right now in this season? Like, you can look to the future, that's fine. Some people are very future focused, but what's going to help you out right now? And I think as a business owner, it's the same thing, and a parent and a wife and all the different titles that we have. What do we need right now in order to get through the season that we're in right now? And what's that marker? And sometimes the marker and sometimes you don't.
Right.
But yeah, having those conversations, I think, is so helpful. And being honest with yourself too. I feel like that's been kind of a theme of this conversation, is being realistic about what is going on versus looking at everything through like, rose colored glasses.
Right. Right. And don't be afraid to take the time. This came up too, but I want to highlight it. Don't be afraid to take the time to think. Like, you can take a sick day, mental health day, and just be alone and journal.
Yeah.
You can take a vacation day and hang out with yourself, go on a staycation, go to the library, read some books.
Yeah.
But I think that reflective time is so helpful. And we're just in such a busy world. And I think people doom scroll because you're bored, but like boredom's okay. Sometimes good stuff can come out of that. So don't be afraid to give yourself that time.
Yes, I love that. Rachel, this has been such an amazing conversation. I love talking to you. I feel like we could probably go on for another hour talking about
Wasn't this supposed to be 30 minutes?
I know. This is going to be a longer
bonus
one. Sorry,
episode.
Okay, what I want you to do is share. You have a webinar. Love for you to talk about that and where people can find you online.
Yep. So my blog that I write on occasionally is moneyhackingmama.com, but I share tips on positive psychology, money, business, things like that. And then I have a course that's about time management, happiness. It's basically how to optimize your life. So the foundation that I have, like that switch that I had with growth mindset and managing my time and everything I learned in positive psychology, I really think that's foundational for people in life. Like, so many people are unhappy, especially after COVID. I think I read a stat the other day, and it was like 73% of people feel stressed out at least like once a week or something like that. I was like, that's not good. So I studied positive psych. There's literally theories that teach you like, here are components of happiness, and literally change these things and you'll be happier. And so I'm not a doctor, but like, you could do meds or you could do this without the meds and the side effects. So something to consider. But I have a free webinar that talks about a lot of this stuff. You can find it at moneyhackingmama.com/webinar. And I'm sure it'll be linked in the show notes.
Yes, it will be linked along with all of your social media and where people can find you. But Rachel, thank you so much for being a guest. This was an amazing conversation.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.